Now, when we speak about radicalization, it's something that I've been also dealing with for quite a while. I did a documentary series
called
Jihad Now, exactly.
Right.
Radicalization, well, we have Jihad Now, but we also have the religious side of things. I've been 4 times in Iraq. I've been doing documentaries there too. And I don't know, I suppose you know, I suppose Yair told you, I'm close to Pope Francis, and he asked me to invest all the efforts to try to know, to present to the world the Christian issue also in the Middle East. So I did a documentary in English. I think it's, I don't remember, but I think it's 52 minutes. That I can also find it and send it to you soon, explaining what's happened to the Christian in the Middle East in the last years, since the Arab Spring, since the revolutions, since the beginning of the Islamic State. So what happened, where we are, it's, I would say, a 2-3 years old documentary. It should be really interesting to update it, by the way. Today, and to know what's happening. But anyway, so this is my introduction.
So if we go back to Pope Francis, I mean, you've just mentioned that you know Pope Francis personally, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were the one who encouraged Pope Francis to travel to the Middle East for the very first time in 2014, correct?
Correct.
So,
and I was the organizer of the prayer of peace, for peace with Abu Mazen and Peres. Shimon Peres, yes.
Pope Francis visited the Middle East recently, in March this year. More specifically, he traveled to northern Iraq, to the areas that once were under ISIS control. Was the Pope's visit of any significance to the Iraqi Christians?
Oh, absolutely. Look, when I was in the last 7 years, 6 years, 4 times in Iraq, northern Iraq, in Kurdistan really, but also we went out of Kurdistan. I was for a while in Mosul also, and in the front of Daesh. I remember that the first time I went there, the Pope called me every day. And I gave him, I met Christian refugees in the refugee camp in Erbil, and I called him, and he spoke with them. They were like in shock when they heard it, that's the Pope. They were like, you know, trembling with emotion, but it was amazing. And he wanted to know exactly firsthand what happened, why did they abandon their villages, it was really quite impressive. And since then, we always speak about that when we meet, and we used to meet 6-7 times a year until the beginning of Corona. Since then, we spoke by phone sometimes, but we didn't meet. But I'm going to see him in January. I don't know the date exactly, but I'm going to see him in the Vatican in January. We are building something, a worldwide project called the Education Global Pact. That is now in discussion. I'm one of the 4 founders, and now it's in discussion if it's going to be the Human Pact, which is because of Corona and because of all the changes of the last time. So I hope that in the end of January, things will be more clear. Anyway, well, this is an issue that nobody deals with, the Christians in the Middle East, in the international media, which is astonishing. Think. Yeah. It's really, I don't know how come, but that's the fact.
But there's still, and again, correct me if I'm wrong. You've traveled to these areas. There are still thousands of people, internally displaced people, mainly Christians, and the Yazidis, obviously, living in refugee camps, in camps for internally displaced persons. So has their situation been in any way impacted by the Pope's visit, in practical terms?
I can tell you that I don't know. I hope that's the case. I know he's trying to do his best everywhere, He's doing it in Egypt with the Copts. He's doing it in Syria and Iraq with the Christian, and also with the others, also with the Yazidis. He's very, very aware of the genocide the Yazidis suffered. They say 74 genocides since the beginning of Islam, and this is the 74th. He tries to get all the information he can about their situation. He's in direct contact with the priests in the different places, and he's aware of the difficulties, which are amazing still, even today. And I have the feeling that in some places, we are seeing a kind of Daesh 2.0 rising their heads and their presence. And I think it can be quite dangerous. You know, there is an Israeli lady in the last 8 years. Her name is Lisa Miara. She's British. She came to Israel 40 years ago, and she found herself in a refugee camp close to Dohuk in Kurdistan, not far from Mosul, 35 kilometers from Mosul. She created there an NGO called Springs of Hope. And she released hundreds, if not thousands, of girls, slaves, sexual slaves, that Daesh kidnapped, most of them Yazidis, some of them Christian, and also boys, 3 years old to 12, 13, who were trained to become terrorists, some of them, or slaves. They used to serve the Daesh people. And she released some of them. She brought them to the camp, to the different camps. Many of them lost their families. So she's supporting them, giving them medicines, education, therapy, whatever she can. It's quite amazing. And I think you should speak with her. And you'll have lots of
first-hand information.
Yeah, exactly. And she's there. She's in Sharia. So, and she told me, for instance, that there is a drama going on with kids that were the result of rape of Daesh people to those Yazidi girls. They had babies, and these kids, now 5, 7, 8 years old, 10 years old, they are like wolves, you know, like Mowgli's in the middle of the field. Nobody wants them, not their families. The Daesh people, they were killed, most of them, and the Yazidis, they see them as Daesh people. So she said, this is the next generation of Daesh.
You've mentioned that the fate of the Christians, in particular the Middle Eastern Christians, is not widely covered in the mainstream media. I mean, there seems to be very little attention given to the fate of the Christians worldwide. And why do you think is that? And I'm talking about Western Europe, Europe in general, and the wider West. Why do you think that this topic is not getting enough attention?
Because we live in a very, very stereotypic world with McDonald's journalism, which means instant. And if you need to explain something like what Christians in the Middle East, how come we know about Muslim, we know about Jews, but Christian, what are they doing there? So it's complicated. When you explain about that, people must really concentrate and try to understand, and we don't have time for that. I mean, people, it's like too complex, so they in a way they are forgotten. And by the way, the interesting thing is that these are communities that are there since Jesus. I mean, since 2,000 years ago. They went there from the Holy Land. They went there and they live there. They pray in Aramaic. Their prayer reminds really the rabbis, mainly the Sephardic rabbis. When I was in a mess there in in a church, I really had the feeling I was hearing a rabbi, a Jewish rabbi, praying in Morocco or in Egypt or somewhere like this. You know, it was really amazing to see it. It sounds the same. You can see the roots of Christianism, the Jewish roots of Christianism, when you meet them, and they were there for 2,000 years, and suddenly they left. Now, some of them came back, I know, in Syria mainly, but some others are still lost in refugee camps, and some others, just the lucky ones, left to Europe.
Right. Well,
they
according
are
to
Germany, they are whatever, Austria, Sweden, etc.
According to some estimates, the Christian population in Iraq has decreased by 80% since 2003. I'm not sure if that's correct.
Maybe it's even more.
And it's the same in Syria. I think in Syria it was around 2 million, 1.7 million in 2011.
Yeah.
And then now it's less than 500,000. But it's also the same in Gaza and in West Bank, where it's around
Gaza,
0.5%.
Nobody speaks about Gaza, but in Gaza there is a drama that I've been covering for, I think, 8-9 years, when there were 4,000 or 5,000 Christians there, and they used to come to Bethlehem in Christmas. They used to have a permission to come, and some of them just escaped. They used that permission not to go back. Some others there were attacked, were aggressed. There were rapes, there were burnings of churches. There were missiles launched on a church. Some were obliged to convert into Islam. I know personally a gentleman who was an officer of the Arafat Palestinian Authority Army, who escaped from Gaza. And when he came back to Gaza to try to save his house, he had there his wife and the children, he was obliged to convert into Islam. And there are pictures about that. I mean, the drama in Gaza is unbelievable, and nobody speaks about that. I asked myself what's going on now, but I don't think that good things are happening to the community. But again, Syria and Iraq is the big story. I think if you're telling if they are 500,000 today, I doubt it. I think
probably
they are
less
less.
than that.
I think they still use these statistics to try to convince the world to help them, but they must be less. Because normally the Christians had higher socioeconomic status, so they could pay to Daesh and to others to reach Europe. They are more educated, etc., so they left. And by the way, the same happens with the Christian Palestinians in the West Bank, in Bet Sahur and Bethlehem. Many left, many are in Latin America, many. You know, in Bet Sahur, there is close to Bethlehem, there is a big community, Christian community, there was. Today, you have only in Santiago de Chile, 4 times more people, Christian from Palestine, than in Bet Sahur. You see, so many of them left. And well, that's it. It's quite complicated.
You've mentioned this stereotypical perception of the Middle East as one of the reasons behind lack of widespread coverage of these issues. Do you think that political correctness could also be blamed for that? And the fact that people just simply do not want to talk about certain groups or religions, or because of fear of being branded this and that.
You know, nothing in the Middle East, nothing is what it looks to be. Right. So it's completely different. I was in Qatar last week, and I met someone from the government, and we had a conversation. He said, look, I was talking about education, about the problem of the book texts that are an incentive to radicalization still today in many places. And he said, look, it's not only against Jews, it's also, for instance, when I must tell to a friend that I have a Muslim friend, that I have a Christian friend, he looks at me very So I must justify myself. I must say, I have a Christian friend, his name is Nabil, but he's a very nice guy. So the problem is also an internal problem in the Middle East. This is a minority that was always against the wall in a way. In some places they are more respected, in some others they are less respected, and they are more discriminated. But many times they don't dare to tell it publicly because they are a small minority and they feel in danger. Mm. So only when you speak off the record, they open their hearts and they say what's going on and how do they feel. So that's also a problem. So if they don't cry their reality, if they don't say to the West their reality, because they are afraid of the reaction, nobody really is aware, and they think, this must be propaganda, or Western propaganda, or Zionist propaganda, or things like that. So, right. But that's a reality.
Mm. We've mentioned these decreasing numbers of Christians, very rapidly decreasing numbers of Christians in the Middle East. Do you think that Christianity is basically destined to disappear from its birthplace, which is the Middle East?
If nothing dramatic will happen or will be done in the next decade, I believe thousands of churches will become museums or mosques.
Mm. Right. In the documentary that you've mentioned, the documentary that you made in 2016, Jihad Now, you explored the roots of Islamic radicalization. What are the roots of what is known as Islamism, political Islam, Islamic fundamentalism, whatever you want to call it?
How many weeks do you have? This is a semester in university, but look, there are many roots for sure. But I think we must always remember that if we have 1,600,000,000 Muslim, mm-hmm. still the radicalization is hitting a small minority. Mm-hmm. Too much, in my opinion. Maybe 8%, if you follow the last surveys done and research, 8% share the Salafi opinions. Now, how does it happen? I think it happens in different ways. If you go to the Muslim community in Europe, you can say that there is a study done by a sociologist, a French sociologist, Olivier Roy, mm-hmm. R-O-I. He did a psychological profile of the terrorists who did terror attacks in Europe in the last 5 years in 4 countries, in Germany, in Belgium, in the UK, and France. And it was amazing, the conclusion. He said that 60% of them are children from the first generation born in Europe. Their parents arrived as immigrants just to improve their economic situation, to give an education to their children, but they didn't really adapt it to Europe. At the same time, they lost the contact on first hand with the homeland of their mm-hmm. parents. So they were in a way in a vacuum. They were lost. And this is 60%, the first generation in Europe of the terrorists in these attacks. 15% were the second generation, which means the grandchildren of the original immigrants. And the last 25% are people, normally Christians, local, who converted into Islam.
25%.
25%. And this is a phenomenon that is not, in my opinion, we know very little about that. There is a kind of zero coverage. I tried to do something on that, but it's so difficult. I can tell you there are some hundreds of thousands of Europeans in different countries, in Spain, in France, in Scandinavia, in Great Britain, who converted into Islam, who radicalized. Many of them were used to steal, they were pickpockets, or they were selling marijuana in the streets. They went to jail, and the jail was in France, in Britain, in Spain, the best university for terrorism. They went out of jail, part of the hierarchy of these groups. They went out of jail having knowledge on Islam that they didn't have before they went, having a kind of a framework where to be. Lost souls that suddenly had a group to belong to. And some of them, men and women, even went to Iraq and Syria. And they were part of Daesh land, of the Islamic State. And some of them came back, some others didn't. They are still there. But anyway, I think this was a very strong factor of radicalization.
I think, I'm not entirely sure right now, but I think it was a British historian, Timothy Garton Ash, who called these people who feel neither connected to their parents' culture nor to the European culture, in between people, basically emphasizing the identity issues. Right. What do you think Europe is doing wrong as far as integration of migrants is, of these kind of people precisely is concerned? Because it looks like the US doesn't have this problem, or if it does, it's not to that extent as we do in Europe. What do you think we're doing wrong?
I think Europe did many mistakes. I think Europe have a very serious problem. And the first thing is not being ready to confront the problem, to be aware of it, to understand that the fact you debate on these matters, it doesn't mean that you are Le Pen or that you are part of the extreme right, that you are a racist and a xenophobe. No, it's part of the changes. It's the biggest democratic changes since the Second World War. So we are, I can tell you, I gave a lecture in the European Parliament. They invited me. And one of the things they were asking is about the Islamization of Europe. So I asked them, how many Muslims are there in Europe? You should see their faces. They moved in their chairs. They were not comfortable. It looked to them like, this guy, what is he talking about? A neo-Nazi question, you know? So I said, no. I only want to know how far, what is the information you have, really? It's important. Demography, it's the first thing you should be aware of if you want to solve this problem, if you want to speak about integration. So there were parliament members, I think from, I don't know, 18 countries. Each one said another number. Some said 40 million, some others said 43, 44, 48, 50, 52, 54, okay? That was the highest number. Anyway, that means that even the leadership of Europe is not aware of what are we talking about. What are the facts? I'm not talking about opinions, I'm talking about facts. And what is the real problem? When I interviewed the intelligence services in 5 countries, in Belgium, in Germany, in France, in the UK, and in Spain, they all said something, the same statistics that were quite surprising. They said, we know about 12,000 people in Europe, Europeans, who touched in any way weapons. That means they got training, they were in Syria or Iraq, they were involved in the preparation, in planning terror attacks, 12,000 people. And I remember a judge, a Spanish judge, a very well-known guy, Baltasar Garzón, who is very respected in the world. He said to me, imagine having in Europe 12,000 potential suicide bombing person, that's really a huge number. And this is a very big problem for us, and we don't know how to deal with it.
Right. But do you think that this inability to deal with it, perhaps it's got something to do with the concept of national identity that in most European countries, Western European countries, well, Eastern as well, is different than in the States? I mean, what I mean is you are born French, you're born German, you're born Spanish, Portuguese, Polish. You do not become these nations like it is in the US. In the US, you can become American, right? While I and this is just my opinion, obviously, but it seems to me that in most European countries, it's very difficult to become, you know, as I've said, Spanish, Italian, German, French, no matter how much you try, right? But you still are not, you haven't been born into the nation, which means that you probably will have problems being accepted as such.
And not only that, this is a very important point, but the European Union is still very young in a historic point of view. And I think that the European Union didn't decide yet what do they want to be when they will grow up. Is this an economic union? Is this a diplomatic union? Is this going to be a defense union? Is Europe going to have one army really, and the different countries are going to renounce to that? Now, is Europe a Christian club, or it can accept, for instance, people from Turkey, which is a country with 80 million Muslim, and if they join the European Union, the DNA of Europe will change. It will not be mostly Christian. So I think there is an identity problem. I think these jumps of Brexits and things like this mean that it's not yet stable. And maybe our grandchildren will have a new reality. I think it will be a pity if the European Union will be dismantled. I hope not. But anyway, one of the things that Europe, the new Europe, must understand is that the Europe where I was born, and I remember I always say when I used to arrive to an airport in Europe, if you close my eyes, I can guess where I am, because everybody uses the same aftershave, the same kind of tobacco, of black tobacco in Spain, Ducados of black tobacco in France, the kind of, you know, you could really know where you are. Today, Europe is a multicultural continent. It's completely different. So you must be aware of that if you want to confront the problems of the future, and not saying that, no problem, everything is all right. And we can find ourselves with the extreme right in many countries in power in the next years.
And I think that the issue is also with, you know, the European identity, what it means to be European. What is this European identity? And you know, we talk about European values, but what are these European values?
Absolutely.
And then I have a feeling also that European elites are a little bit hesitant to accept Judeo-Christianity as one of the roots of our cultural heritage, right?
It's true.
So yeah, Professor Hirschfeld, would you?
You know, we are fascinated by what you're talking, and there are many questions that we have on.
I'm not sure I have the answers, Yair, but let's try.
Let me tell you what I'm thinking beyond what Marta is saying. I have a close connection to a very strong group in Germany and Austria, which is led by the former former head of the organizational head of the Munich Security Conference. I don't know if you know him, Oliver Orlov, and there's an Austrian Jew, and they think similar to us that the world is too superficial and there's too too much only the good, all the things you're talking about. And they're willing to help quite a lot. They have a lot of influence in Germany and Austria. And part of the things we want to think with you, and if it is okay, I'll come to speak with you, and then whenever it is easy for you, and seeing directly not on that, and see how we work on the Eastern Mediterranean. And there are many things you say that belong into different boxes, and it's difficult to find one box after the other. Even the box of the Christians, the question of global education is dramatic, and the question is how can what comes up to me, and you're in the center of it. How can you convince the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Saudi Arabia to take part in a global education effort against radical Islam? I think this is the most dramatic question, because if we go against radical Islam, we only strengthen them. If they do it, it is a very different picture. And from the historical view that I have is that when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, the Americans, in their unlimited brilliance, gave enormous support to these Taliban forces and these very radical guys. And it was a good idea for Saudi Arabia and for Qatar and for some of those others to have these very militant schools all over the world. And they were encouraged to do so.
Yair, I think that if you come to Saudis, Egyptian, which is the center, but then you add the Emirates and Jordan, this quartet, and if you want the quintet, you can bring also Morocco to the table because they have a certain importance. I think these 5 countries will be more than ready. By the way, they are already trying to do it, to fight against any sort of radicalization. I can tell you that I saw already movies, very, very good movies, very good videos, short videos produced by them without identity, without saying who did it, that are with quite good level, fighting radicalization. And really impressive. But I don't see something organized. I don't see something that is really, that's a common effort. It's in a way done very, under the table. So this is one thing. Now, when we speak about Qatar, I was there last week. It's more complicated because I think that in the aspect of Shiites of Iran, they are part of this coalition. Absolutely. I mean, I feel the same fear about Iran and the Iranian influence in the area as I feel in other places in the Middle East, from Oman to Kuwait, including Saudi Arabia and Emirates, Egypt, Jordan, everyone, they share it. Iran is a monster, but they don't say it publicly, but they say it off the record. Now, when you speak about Muslim brothers, that's something else, because their main ally today is Turkey, even if they don't say it publicly. I mean, there is a kind of coalition, Turkey, Qatar. And even if Qataris are not so pro-Muslim brothers, President Erdogan is. And he is their number one ally. So there is here a very complicated thing for Qatar. Qatar is a small country that is having more influence. On one side, by the way, they are getting closer to Israel. There are all kinds of moves with Israel, and they try to reach the Americans through Israel. That's the main goal. All of them are in panic of the American administration. and they want to get closer to Biden, to Blinken, to Harris, to all of them. So Israel can be a tool on that way, especially this new government. But at the same time, they have the Turks that are the biggest allies, and they think, well, they support Hamas, they something else. So in a way, they are also a little bit lost. And in the middle of that, they have the World Cup, which is going to be one of the biggest international events ever. I was there, I saw what they are preparing, and for them it will be a kind of maturity exam, and they want to do the best World Cup ever in history, and they invested $200 billion. Now imagine a country with 300,000 people. It's like your city, Haifa. So imagine a country like Haifa organizing something like this. It's completely, really, it's amazing. And but there is an opportunity. They are going to accept people from all over the world, including Israelis. 50,000, 60,000 Israelis, I suppose, will come, and with Israeli passports. So there is also a chance there. But again, if we speak about ideological coalition against all sorts of radicalization, I think it can be done, and I think we can even bring the Pope to the table also.
How?
Explaining to him there is a chance of doing it. You must be aware that, I mean, the Jewish side and the Christian side will be immediately, automatically okay for that. The problem will be in the Muslim side. And here you have two different figures and dozens of smaller figures. You have two different figures, personalities, who think in different ways. One is the Imam of Al-Azhar in Cairo, who is very, very negative towards this kind of initiatives, mainly with the Jewish side, not with Christians. They are very close to the Pope, but they don't want to have really relation with the direct relation with Jews. But at the same time, you have the Imam of Mecca, Muhammad Isa, who was in Auschwitz and who is very, very close to Jewish leadership. He would, I spoke with him, he would like to come to Israel. He would be ready in the future to do it. He's an open mind guy. He understands that you need at least this triangle, which is Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. And he respects the Jews as the elder brothers, a little bit like Pope Francis thinks about the Jews. So, but the Pope is closer to the gentleman from Al-Azhar in Cairo. But I can speak with him. I can bring him an idea of creating a spiritual NATO, if you want.
Yeah.
Something like this. That would be...
I think we can do quite a lot. On the, I think first of all, the I think if this is recorded itself is a very important document. Listening to you is an experience, I must say.
Really, you know, I have a problem. I don't remember what I said until.
It's all on record.
I hope it was not nonsense.
It's on record. Now we dealt with the question. We didn't deal with cooperation in the Eastern Mediterranean.
But it's not true, because if we can add the countries of the Eastern Mediterranean to this kind of G12, G20, whatever, that could be a good idea, because that would be, I think, even larger. If you can add Cyprus and Greece and whatever, it could be even nicer. I think it could be more attractive.
Do you think that, because obviously I'm sure that Cyprus, Greece would very much like the idea, but countries like Syria eventually, or perhaps even Lebanon. Would that be at some point possible or not? Not really.
Look, in Syria, there are many things going on. And I heard now in Qatar interesting things on that I don't know if I should believe or if it's fake news, but we should check what's going on in Syria. Some people claim that President Assad is fed up with Iranians and that he would like to join the Arab League again and change the path. Some others say that this is nonsense. This is a Catholic marriage with Iranians. He was saved by them, and he depends on them, and he will never do this step. But the Christians support Assad because the alternative to Assad is...
we could see what's the alternative, yes.
Exactly, so they support him. So I wouldn't say no directly, but we should check, we should think about this. But for sure, all the other Arab countries, I told you, they would join. And you know what? Maybe Iraq would join even. You know, Iraq is looking for all kind of bridges with the world and with Israel, by the way. So who knows? Why?
No, I think that the most important candidate to join is Russia.
Okay.
If the Russians join, you know, we had an interview with the Russian a guy called Dr. Shorko. He actually spoke exactly what you say. He spoke of saying, you know, Syria is afraid of the Shiites and of Iran. They are a threat to Syria, and the Russians would like to help us to get them out of there. I'm not sure what the price would be, but on this, the Greek Orthodox Church definitely has an interest in maintaining Christianity in the Middle East, and the Russians would be an interesting partner. And one of the things we could think of, and would be very, very important, would be actually to say, you need the Russians for security in the Eastern Mediterranean. The Americans are getting out, or if they're not getting out, they become more and more impotent, which is not far different. And the Europeans have no military power, and and you need the Europeans to come in. Now you have also in Germany a new Bundeskanzler who will try to come closer to the Russians than Merkel was, for a variety of reasons.
I agree with you, Yair, but I think that before we go to the Russians, we should check what is the reaction of the Saudis, of the Emirates, to be sure they are okay with that. Because if not, they could say bye-bye and you stay with the Russians. And besides this, I think we should, the Pope will ask to bring Bartolomeo, the patriarch, the Greek patriarch, who is in Istanbul. And he's a very, very good partner of Francis. So we should also bring him to the equation, I think. So, but if you want, Yair, we should prepare like a one-pager, and I can show that to the Pope when I'll see him in January. I think.
I will definitely. This is, you know, you don't show such a challenge to me without me saying no.
I don't want to keep you any longer. Thank you so very much. It was an absolute pleasure and really fascinating to listen to you. And I hope that we could perhaps in the future, when also Dr. Pelagias is available, that perhaps we could follow up on it and yes, discuss a little bit more in detail what is it that we could actually do, right?
It will be a pleasure.